It's a significant new grant to support a program that we call the Thrive Program at the Sasso House, which is designed to support female identifying victims of sex trafficking. Thrive serves young people ages 14 to 21 who've been victims of domestic sex trafficking. And it's a very sobering topic, but we're told by local FBI agents that it's a growing problem in our community. Thanks to the generosity of a local donor, Valley Youth House owns and operates a 6-bedroom confidential safe house in Allentown called the Sasso House, which serves as the full-time residence for up to 6 individuals at a point in time. And as you'll hear today, these participants receive weekly therapy sessions from full-time master-level therapists, as well as full-time life skills counselors that help them complete their education, obtain a job, and develop essential life skills. And you know, there's several ways in which a young person can be drawn into trafficking. Sometimes it's unfortunately at the use of a family member. Sometimes it's an online interaction. And sometimes it's the result of the young person running away and being homeless. And it's these runaway and homeless youth that Valley Youth House encounters on a regular basis. The organization called VAST, which stands for Valley Against Sex Trafficking, reports that 1 out of every 3 runaway youth will be lured into trafficking within 48 hours of leaving their home. So there are people out there looking for these vulnerable children. In Lehigh County, the district attorney's office and the local FBI agents have found traffickers operating at local hotels, as well as regional truck stops, casinos, and massage parlors. And many of the youth found in these settings have a history of sexual and physical abuse and emotional neglect, which makes them vulnerable to be trafficked. So given the importance of helping these survivors, the Thrive program has received ongoing support from Lehigh County and Northampton County children and youth. And when we started the program 3 years ago, we obtained startup funding for the first 2 years from the U.S. Department of Justice. It was a competitive grant process that we went through, and because of the caliber of our team and our application, we received that grant. But now that the Department of Justice grant expired, we're thrilled to announce that as a result of the advocacy efforts from State Representative Josh Siegel and the entire Lehigh Valley legislative delegation, a grant of $150,000 has been issued by the state of Pennsylvania to help support this year's expense. And to tell you a little more about this grant, I'd like to introduce State Representative and our friend, Josh Siegel.
Thank you, Tom. And to reiterate, none of this would have been possible if it were not for the collaborative nature of the Lehigh Valley. And I want to make sure that all of my colleagues who helped advocate on behalf of Valley Youth House and the Thrive program get equal credit, equal recognition. What we do so well here in the Lehigh Valley as a delegation is that we come together, we work together, and we work collaboratively, and we think regionally. And so, not just myself, but Representative Mike Schlossberg, Representative Peter Schweier, Jeannie McNeil, Steve Samuelson, and Bob Freeman. We all came together as the Northeastern delegation and made an ask of our legislative body as a whole that this program would not go without the critical funding that it needed. And special credit is really owed to Chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Jordan Harris, who was kind enough and empathetic enough and recognized the value of this program and greenlit the $150,000 that we were able to deliver here today. And so I think I share a great deal of pride as part of the Lehigh Valley delegation and the work that we're capable of doing, our bipartisan spirit, and the fact that we put our heads together and we advocate aggressively and we advocate collaboratively to make sure that we deliver for our region. And that's what's happened here today. Months ago, Tom came to me and he told me that there was going to be a considerable shortfall for the Thrive program. It was going to really threaten and imperil this critical program's ability to meet the needs of young women who had survived and escaped sex trafficking here in the Lehigh Valley. And we got to work very quickly in Harrisburg making sure that we could address this. In short order, we approached our Appropriations Committee, we got to the budget proceedings, and in a very quick period of time, we were able to turn around and make sure that these funds were delivered. And it's important. As Tom referenced, the Lehigh Valley really is at the center of sex trafficking and human trafficking here in the state of Pennsylvania. Our proximity to the I-95 corridor and our proximity just in terms of the Northeast makes us a hotbed for folks looking to exploit vulnerable young women who are either fleeing a situation or manipulating them as a result of being an intimate partner or a family member. We have a huge role to play in making sure that we address that crisis. Pennsylvania actually ranks 9th in the country in terms of new human trafficking cases every year. So we are one of the top 10 states in the country dealing with human trafficking and sex trafficking. It's a shady underground industry that is ensnared 49 million people globally and creates about $150 billion a year in illicit profits. And 70% of the victims of human trafficking and sex trafficking are women and young girls. It is an epidemic that disproportionately affects our female population. And that's why programs like Thrive, I think, are so vital, because we know that it disproportionately falls on young women and young girls who are being abused, being manipulated, being extorted. And programs like this make sure that they get a shot to reclaim their lives, make sure that they can reintegrate into society in a healthy, mentally and physically fulfilled life, where they can hopefully shed the scars that have been inflicted on them and move beyond the pain associated with the trauma of human trafficking. And look, it's frankly, it's an issue that affects folks whether you're a citizen or not. I think it's a common misconception that human trafficking is not a problem in the United States. It's more an issue in developing countries, and it's also an issue that appears, or people tend to believe, only affects undocumented residents or folks sort of living underneath the law. Well, it's not really true. In fact, 41% of all sex trafficking and human trafficking victims in the United States are U.S. citizens. They're folks that have all legal rights. They're here following the law, and they're victims because it is an intimate partner who decides to manipulate them and lower them away for their family and extort them for their labor or for commercial sex acts. And look, we've done a lot in Harrisburg from the standpoint of punishment and prosecution, and that's a critical component. We need to make sure that there is no shadow under which a sex trafficker can hide. We want to make sure that criminal syndicates or family members that decide to abuse and take advantage of young women and young girls have no safe haven, no place that they can hide. And we want to make sure that our law enforcement, our district attorneys, our state and local federal agencies have all the resources that they need, frankly, to strike fear into the hearts of romantic partners, acquaintances, or criminal organizations who see young men and women as commodities. But I think what's so valuable about Thrive is it recognizes that even after we've done all the work of breaking up these networks and holding folks accountable for this heinous, disgusting crime, we have to help people put back the pieces in their lives. And Thrive, which is specifically geared to young women 14 to 21, is a critical part of that. And what struck me most within that acronym is the victorious component, because I think at the heart of this program, it's about taking victims and turning them into victors. I always think about the old axiom that the best revenge is to live a good life. And I can't begin to comprehend the anguish and the pain that an individual escaping sex trafficking feels. But I can imagine that there is a tremendous amount of rage and anger and pent-up emotion and desire maybe to get back. And I think that the most important thing we can do for folks escaping that trauma and that angst is exactly what Thrive does, is making sure that they feel a newfound sense of empowerment, a newfound sense of confidence and certainty that they have a network of folks who love them and care about them and pull them out of that trauma and take them from victim to victor so that they can reclaim their own lives and live a rich and fulfilling life. And I'm glad that this $150,000 is going to make sure that Thrive can continue that work. And it's my sincere hope that in the years forward, the Commonwealth will move from a one-off annual commitment to a line item, so that we can make investments in programs like Thrive and programs like it around the Commonwealth to help more young women, more victims of sex trafficking and human trafficking escape and find a new life, a newfound sense of purpose, and most importantly, a new community, so that they can be beacons and symbols of resilience and rebirth, so that they might inspire other women, other folks to escape, to come forward, to get out, so that they can find their own new beginning. And so I'm proud to stand with Valley Youth House and Tom and all the fine folks at this organization who do so much tremendous work around the Lehigh Valley for our marginalized communities, for our LGBTQ residents, for folks who feel like they've been left behind and left out. Valley Youth House gives them that safe haven and that safe place where they can begin anew. And I look forward to continue to advocate for this program in Valley Youth House as long as I have the pleasure and privilege of serving in Harrisburg. So thank you.
you, Josh. We'd like to now introduce Ken Klein, who serves as our Senior Vice President for Programming here at Valley Youth House, who helped with several of our other staff members make this program a reality. Ken, would you please come forward?
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Representative Siegel. It's thrilling to hear someone talk about traffic the way it needs to be talked about. We have victims in our community who are not being served because we don't really acknowledge the problem. The Lehigh Valley has been very progressive in looking at this. We have VAs and people in law enforcement officials who work with us. We started looking at this problem 5-6 years ago in our shelter and found that we were getting more and more youth who had experienced trafficking in some way, shape, or form. Like Tom said, 1 in 3, we were seeing upwards of 40% of our youth who had some sort of experience with trafficking. We had no specific programming. We could give them therapy, but it was not geared towards the struggles that they had. These are the youth that are some of the most traumatized youth that you can imagine. Very often, they come from family abuse, and the families are the ones who get them into the trafficking space. So they have been abused, they have been sold by their family basically into sex slavery, and it's a very, very difficult situation for them, needless to say. So when they come to Thrive, they're not trusting, they don't want to hear from us, they want to leave the program as quickly as possible. They want to go back to the folks who have abused them. There's something called a trauma bond, so that when an abuser works with someone, grooms them, it feels like family in a weird way. And so the big challenge for Thrive is, how do we keep the youth with us, right? Because we know that if they're with us for 60 days, they begin to feel like they're part of the community. But they leave, right? So the bond is so strong. They're bonded with the other youth who have been abused, and they go back to the family in the way that we put it. So our job is really to find an environment, to provide an environment where they feel love and concern. Much of this is clinical. The first 60 days is just stabilization because they are so traumatized. Multiple layers of trauma, co-occurring addictions, just everything you could think of from a mental health perspective. So the folks on the team, some of which are over here in the corner who have started this, I had the privilege of writing the grant with Alicia, who's over here hiding because she's not completely dressed for something like this, but she's been a principal in this. She's been the lead therapist and the lead clinician that helped make this program go. We've had about 13 to 15 youth over the last 3 years. We've had a couple of youth go all the way through the program. We had a youth who was sold by her family at 5 years old, came to the program, didn't want anything to do with us. And we eventually broke down the walls. She now has her own apartment, she has a job. She is living in society, and that's really the goal. The issue with this grant, we had the DOJ grant, that ran out. This we needed to fund because having consistent, stable youth is not part of the program. They often leave. We could have 4 one day and 1 the next. So it's very important that we have supplemental funding like this. It's very critical to us. So we're grateful. We thank the representative. We thank Tom, who's been instrumental in this as well. All of you being here to support us. It's a very big deal. There are very few programs like this, especially for adolescents. We mentioned LGBTQ youth, disproportionately abused, and we see that often. Youth that are in foster care are targets, and they're not just targets, we see the movie Taken, it's not like that. This happens in high schools, it happens in communities, and the predators are out there and they're training people to groom these youth. So we like to think that we're providing a safe haven, but there's much, much more need. And I appreciate especially the notion of continuing this in the future, because this work needs to be done. It's hard, the staff is dedicated, it's hard work. I've gotten to work there a couple of times myself because we were short-staffed, and the stories would break your heart. But these youth are like any other youth. They need our love, they need our support, they need our compassion. And because of this program, because of funding we're receiving, they will get it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. So that wraps up our formal presentation. I'd like to call on our board chair, Phil Jackson, for some closing comments. And then if you have questions, we will take those or do an interview, whatever you like. Phil?
Thank you. As Tom said, I'm Phil Jackson, and I am the board chair for Valley Youth House. And I would like to personally thank you, Representative Siegel, for all you've done for us. And on behalf of the Board of Directors and our advisory boards, we're very appreciative of what you've been able to accomplish. You know, I travel across the community frequently, and I always run into Representative Siegel. You're very visible, and but more importantly than being visible, you and the delegation have really delivered for our community. I see what you're doing, and this is breakthrough grant for us. We need the funding to do what we do, and more than just the grant, we're able now to leverage your recognition of a critical need in our community. This will help us raise more funds for the program, so we thank you very much for that, and we thank you and the delegation for all you do in the community. So thank you, and we'll be available for questions for some time. And Tom's offered to give a tour of the building if you want one. Thank you all for coming.
All right, that concludes our program. Thank you very much for being here, and obviously we'll take any questions you would have after this. Thank you.
Leslie,